Well, we are celebrating the season of Advent, and this is our third week. We have 2 more weeks before Christmas, but this week's theme, or the celebration, is joy. So I'm going to take us right back to the passage that our beautiful women read. It's one of the more famous passages about this Christmas story that we celebrate. So we're going to go back to that Luke chapter 2, and we're going to read it one more time. Let's go ahead and read it together. We're only going to read up to verse 14. We will not have time to go through the end of the passage, but let's start from verse 8. And I'm going to have everyone just read together in unison all the way through verse 14. Ready? Let's go.
And there were shepherds living out in their fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. The angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly, a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests."
Okay, that's the end of it. Now, if you are a serious student of the Bible, eventually you're going to come to realize that this is not a simple story of Christmas. In fact, it is one of the most difficult passages to understand because there are only two accounts of this birth story, the birth of Jesus. One is found in Luke chapter 2, and the other is found in Matthew chapter 2. So you can actually go back and read these two stories. Scholars have argued and debated, and even some people have really dismissed this story altogether as sort of a fabricated, made-up story because the two stories actually do not line up. In Matthew's version, there's no mention of manger. There's no mention of the shepherd. It starts with the genealogy of Jesus, and it starts with the story of Herod. And then here, in Luke chapter 2, the story actually begins with this empire-wide census. And everybody had to go back to their ancestral hometown to register, and probably the purpose was for taxation. So it's two different accounts, and those stories actually do not line up. In fact, if you do a little bit of research, Herod, that appears in Matthew chapter 2, and Quirinius, who actually ordered the census to take place, they did not even live in the same time period. There was about a decade of gap between the death of King Herod in Matthew chapter 2 and the story of this Augustus and the census that took place because of the governor of Syria, whose name was Quirinius. So, I just kind of ruined your kind of a Christmas, all put together Christmas story where we see the shepherds and the magi and this manger with baby Jesus wrapped in cloth all together, because that's kind of a mixed version of Matthew's account and Luke's account. Now, why is this important? Because it seems like to me, again, I don't have the knowledge. I've actually studied this for many, many years, and I have no answer. Maybe we don't have enough information. Maybe some of the things that are described here, Luke could have been wrong. I don't know. Some scholars argue that, he did not have those information correctly. Or we may not even have a very accurate archaeological information to actually even date those events. And so I don't know what actually happened. But what we want to look at today is that that's not really the point of the story. Matthew and Luke had a very different kind of an approach to telling this story, and there's a reason for that. So today, the message, I actually titled it as The Paradox of Christmas. What is a paradox? Some of you know that I use this word quite often. You know why? Because a lot of the things that the Bible actually teaches us seems like a paradox. It seems like a contradiction. Even here, the story of Matthew and Luke are almost like contradictory to each other. But here's a definition of paradox. Let me just read this for you. This is straight from the dictionary.com. Paradox is a statement or proposition that, despite sounding reasonable, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logically unacceptable, or self-contradictory. So why is Christmas a paradox? In fact, I originally titled this message, The Paradox of Christian Joy, because we're talking about joy this week. Now, if you remember, this is an incredible angelic encounter. Sometimes that word angel is used to interpret messenger, but here it is very obvious that these angels, or the messengers that the shepherds saw, they were the heavenly beings. They're not the earthly human beings. And so here's one of those rare events where humans encounter angels, and then these angels actually promise or announce the tidings of great joy. And then he declares that there will be peace on earth. Think about how radical this claim was. Jews at the time did not have their own government. They did not have their own land. They went through a lot. They suffered a lot. They were under the oppression of the Roman Empire. And so the angel is announcing this radical claim that there will be great joy to all people, and then there will be peace, finally, on earth. And yet, if you take some of these stories a little more seriously with observing eyes, you're going to discover that that's actually not what happened. What was promised did not actually happen. I want you to really think about the outcome or the implication of the birth of this baby Jesus. Now, once again, if you go back to the Matthew's account, do you remember what happened right after the Magi came to offer gifts to Jesus who was born in Bethlehem? A region-wide massive massacre, killing of all the babies, male child under the age of 2. That's actually what followed the birth of Jesus. And Jesus himself had to flee and go into exile into Egypt for the next 2 years. Because this king, Herod, was so insecure, he was so furious and so determined to wipe out any potential king who will take his place, although we're talking about babies. That's actually what happened. Why so many people actually dismiss this as more of a legend or a fabricated story, because there's really not a lot of historical credibility. Now, if you really think about the life of Jesus, he did not actually bring the kind of joy or peace that the world had been waiting for. Even today, if you are to stand and declare to the world that this Jesus brought great joy to all people and peace on earth, many people will shake their head. In reality, this world is still broken after 2,000 years, still full of grief and sorrows. There's still as much, if not more, violence and injustice in the world that we live in. So Christmas, on the surface, seems like one massive historical paradox, saying that this is what happened, and yet, deep inside, it's actually not what happened or what it actually meant. So the question is this: if we're celebrating joy in this season, joy of the Christmas, where do we find this great joy for all people? And how do we receive this peace that Jesus actually promised, or the angels announced with the first coming of Jesus? I've been studying both joy and peace in the last few weeks, just as we go back to some of these familiar stories. And I've really come to realize that peace and joy are actually the same thing. It's just the two sides of the same reality. Peace that the angels talked about and the Bible talks about is actually an inward reality. It's what goes on inside of our soul. And joy is really the outward expression of that reality. And that's how I've really come to understand both peace and joy. The reason why this Christmas story seems so paradoxical is because oftentimes we as Christians have not really understood what this joy or inner peace is. So we're going to explore a little bit of that. Now, if you remember some of Jesus' saying, do you remember much later when Jesus actually was teaching the disciples, he said, "Do not think that I came to bring peace. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword." Now, that's another radical statement. What is Jesus talking about? Again, paradoxical, contradictory, right? Because the angels announce that great joy to all people and on earth, peace. And yet Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace, but my coming actual bring sword between families, brothers and sisters, and between nations. And then in John chapter 14, Jesus contradicts himself once again. Do you remember what he said? Peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you. I do not give you as the world gives. And here's a key statement. There's a peace that this world understands and how they actually perceive. And then there's a peace that no one has really known that Jesus gives to his people. Two radically different kinds of peace. And in the same way, if really joy is the outward expression of this inner peace, joy is in the same way. There is joy that the world understands and practices. And then there is a joy that Jesus actually can bring into our lives. Joy that we are actually celebrating today. It can be very, very different from how the world actually has understood it to be. So, the rest of our time, we want to just briefly look at what this joy is. Before we do that, I'm going to explain what this joy is not. In fact, I meant to show a short video clip. Kelvin, do we have that video clip? I came across this a little video. It's a 1-minute video that really captures how the world understands what this joy is. So let's just watch that and then I'll get back. I don't know if there's any Amazon employee here. If there is, please take my apology. This has nothing to do with Amazon. I almost bought that cushion when I saw this video. Isn't it so heartwarming? I mean, it's such a cute video. I showed it to our girls, and they were all going, oh. But here's what I'm trying to communicate with you. This is how the world would actually define what joy is. Biblical joy, the joy that these angels actually talked about and announced, has nothing to do with this. Let me just explain. 3 things that joy is not, at least the biblical joy is not. Number 1, joy is not an emotion. According to this cute film, joy is an emotion. It's a feeling. It's what we feel in that moment as a reaction to something that happens. The biblical joy actually is not an emotion. We see that time and time again. Secondly, joy is not momentary. In this case, how long do you think that joy actually lasted for those darling ladies? A day? Maybe a week? But that's not the kind of joy that Jesus actually talks about or the angels actually announce to the world. We're talking about a lasting joy that becomes the source of our peace, source of our sustenance. And then the third thing that joy is not circumstantial. So much of our joy or our happiness is a reaction or response to something that happens or our circumstances. And yet, joy that the Bible promises has nothing to do with our circumstances. That's why if you actually do a word study on that word joy, which is a really interesting word, it's actually the word is translated as to experience the gift of God or divine grace. That's what it means. But this joy is not circumstantial, and so often when that word appears in the New Testament, the person who was talking about the joy was in a terrible situation. Paul, for example, he says, we looked at this before, rejoice always. How do you rejoice always? I can rejoice sometimes or when good things happen. But how do we rejoice always? But that's what Paul is saying, and he's actually saying those words from prison, in imprisonment. When people are losing their house and they're being persecuted, their family members and loved ones are being dragged away, they were rejoicing, singing praise to God. It's, again, very paradoxical in a lot of ways. So, joy is not emotion, it's not momentary, and it's not circumstantial. It's not a reaction. In other words, joy is not this fuzzy, nostalgic feeling of sliding down this snowy mountain with a comfortable butt cushion underneath your body. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that adrenaline rush of opening that Amazon gift box with that shiny new toy or gadget. Because that's how the world would actually define what joy is. The best definition of joy that I've come across. Again, I wish we had more time to explore this, but I'll keep it very, very brief. According to Scripture, the best definition of this joy that the Bible is talking about, I can give you just one word that will summarize what this joy is, and that is contentment. Are you content today? That's the level of your joy. This joy that the Bible is talking about, it really comes from knowing who you are or knowing what you actually have in Christ. This contentment or this joy comes from this inner reality of living in union with Christ. The more you understand that and more you live out of that reality that you are more content and you're also joyous. Joy is not just absence of negative emotion. A lot of people think that joy is when you have no sadness or sorrow in your heart. That is actually not true. The biblical joy is very, very different. It's in the midst of all of those negative emotions that there's something that will sustain you through. And that's actually what the Bible actually promises. It is this transcending peace. The peace that baffles people's mind. A better way to translate it is peace that surpasses all understanding. It makes no sense. And yet, this peace is really keeping you anchored. To be hopeful, to be joyful in difficult situations. And that's really what the Bible is talking about. All of the anxiety that we feel in this season, all the fears, all the grief that we've experienced in this past year, there's this transcending peace from within that Jesus promises that will actually allow us to overcome all those negative things in this life because we know that Christ is in us and we are in Him. And that's really the meaning of this biblical joy that we're talking about. And also is the awareness of His presence in our lives. Christmas is really about God coming in the flesh, Emmanuel, God with us. The more we are aware of His presence in our surroundings, the more joyful, more content, more secure we become. And there's no room for anxiety or fear. You want to really see the best picture of this joy and peace in a person's life, I can take you to this one famous psalm, Psalm 23. Sometimes it breaks my heart that this psalm, this beautiful psalm, is only read in funeral, right? Because people think that all the promises in Psalm 23 is for those people who pass from this life to the next. I don't understand that. Because Psalm 23 is really a prophetic picture of what it means to be a Christian in this life. The next one will be even better. But this promise is really the picture of our lives because of our union with Christ, that what has become available to us. I'm going to take you just right through, but the reason why I believe that this biblical joy is really contentment is Psalm 23, David makes this astounding statement. He says, Lord is my shepherd. And then there's even a more radical statement there. It says, I shall not want. Who in this life does not have any want? Right? We all have want. We all have need. He's not saying that I don't have any need. He says, because the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. What it means, if I can translate this into a more simpler language, the Lord is my shepherd and I am content. I am fully satisfied. I don't have any deep longing in my heart that I have to have this or I have to have that to feel a sense of satisfaction or accomplishment in this life. David is saying that Lord is good enough for me. And that is really the definition of this biblical joy. It means that I can sleep at night. It means that I can laugh when my life is falling apart because the Lord is my shepherd. And then he goes on to say, He makes me lie down in green pastures. If you know anything about sheep, have you ever seen a sheep lie down? Sheep don't lie down. Lions lie down. You know why sheep don't lie down? Because they're at the bottom of the food chain. If they lie down, they are eaten. They're not fast. They look very, very yummy and fuzzy. So they get eaten alive when they actually lie down. That's why you'll never see a picture of lamb lie down. And David, being a shepherd, he's making this astounding statement. I mean, he grew up shepherding his flock. And he says that he makes me lie down in green pastures. And then he says, he leads me beside quiet waters. Once again, it's a poem, it's a song, it's a metaphor, but this water really represents your daily sustenance. You can go on without food for days and weeks, but you cannot go on without water for even just a few days. It's absolutely essential element in your life. And basically, David is making this declaration that he leads me to what I need. There are two ways to live your life. One is to go after, search for waters in your life, or you can be led to waters that you'll need in this life. And David is making that testimony. And he goes on to say, he restores my soul. Again, joy doesn't mean that we don't go through difficult times in life. I mean, if you look at the situation, the circumstance that David was in, he was being chased by his own enemies. The king who was so insecure that his mission was to destroy David's life. And yet, in the midst of hiding in the caves, in the wilderness, that he writes this song, he says, he restores my soul. And then he says, he leads me in the paths of righteousness. Again, I think this is really the difference between religion and faith. Religion, you try to attain righteousness through your own effort, through becoming a better person, through doing more for God, that you become a righteous person. That's what religion is, where David is saying that he leads me to the paths of righteousness. It's not your own effort. It's not your own awakening. It's not your own brilliance or your own intellect that actually leads you to the path of righteousness. God is solely responsible for even the righteousness of our lives. And that's where our joy actually comes from. And then it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I think this is probably the most accurate definition or description of the biblical peace. Even when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, that you're faced with the shadow of death all over your life, and yet you'll not fear because you know that the Lord is with you. This is the peace that Jesus wants to give to us. This is the confidence that we can actually live from. When we know that He's with us, we can do anything. We don't have to be fearful. And then He says, your rod and staff, they comfort me. For most of us, especially those people who come from Asian background, rod, staff, they're tools of punishment, right? Discipline. And yet, David says, your rod and staff comfort me. When you're going astray, when you're about to fall off the cliff, it's His rod that brings us back, that supports us. And you prepare a table in the presence of my enemies. Just by becoming a Christian, many people think that you'll have no enemies. Trust me, you'll have more enemies in life the moment you become a follower of Christ. And yet, Jesus promises that He'll prepare a table. He'll celebrate with us. Again, it's that picture of this bubbling joy from within in the midst of danger and threat, that you can actually live a life of celebration. Paradoxical again. Doesn't make any sense. It says, He anoints my head with oil, and my cup overflows. This is the promise of abundance. God wants us to live from an overflow, not from an impoverished spirit, not from scarcity. That He wants to pour over our lives so that our cup will overflow. We're supposed to be a source of blessing to other people. That's the picture of a Christian life. And then here's the best one. This is my favorite. It says, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. Imagine living from this reality. Again, I think there are only two kinds of life. The first kind is the life that chases after goodness and love and mercy and all these good things. That's one way to live your life. Another way to live your life is to have God's goodness and His kindness, His mercy chase after us. It's possible for those people who are in Christ. Another beautiful picture of this contentment. You don't have to chase after good things in life. It'll come to you. God will send it on your way. And then you become an overflow of His blessing so that other people in your life end up getting blessed because of God's favor upon your life. This is really what it means to be a Christian. Now here's the most important part. How do we get this joy? How do we even get to enjoy this kind of life? It hangs on one thing. You know what the one thing is? The Lord has to be your shepherd. The question that I want to ask you today, and this is a challenge as well as an invitation, is the Lord your shepherd in your life right now? I don't want you to give me a quick answer, because I'm not even sure I can say that the Lord is completely, fully, 100% in my life, my shepherd. I don't know if I can say that with confidence. All of these things that we're talking about right now, it really hangs on this one premise that Jesus has to be our shepherd. Again, we don't have time to go and talk about these two differences, but the reason why Luke chose this birth story with angels coming to the shepherds. You ever wonder why shepherds? Because in the Gospel of Matthew, the story actually begins with genealogy and King David and the line of David and King of Jews, Herod. I really believe that, it's not a contradiction, but what Matthew is trying to really communicate with the readers is that he's trying to explain the office of the Messiah, Jesus, as king, as the rightful king in the line of David. That's the story of Matthew. But here in the Luke version, I think it's really trying to explain to us the heart of the shepherd, the heart of the Messiah, which is really to shepherd. And I really believe that that's why it includes the story of this manger, and he depicts this Jesus as the Lamb of God. And he's the great shepherd. And that's really the invitation. But the question is that, are we willing to really allow Jesus to become our shepherd? It's not as easy as you think it is. The hard truth is this: the more resource you have in your hand, the more wealth you have in your hand, the more health you have in your hand, more opportunities that you have in your hand, the more education you have, it's going to be harder for you to have Jesus to be your shepherd. For us to have Jesus be our shepherd takes a lot of humility. We've been trained and conditioned from birth that we got to perform. We got to measure up. We got to take care of ourselves. Relying on somebody else for our own happiness or success is a sign of weakness. It's disgrace. That's what we've been taught. So it takes a lot of humility. Sometimes it's even humiliating for us to say that I need somebody to lead me. For my daily sustenance, I can find my own water. I can find my own pasture. I can take care of my own future. That's what we've been trained to do in this life. But what the Bible is actually promising us today is that the only pathway for us to this joy and peace that Jesus promises, and this is really what was announced to the shepherds on that first coming of Jesus, is that we have to be willing to let Jesus be our shepherd. That means that we have to be willing to relinquish the seed of our control over our own lives. That's the hardest thing. If we're honest with ourselves, to let go of the control over my own destiny, my own future, even my own today, it's really, really hard. I'm going to end with this one quote that I came up with. It's a powerful quote that describes what it actually means to be a Christian. And I think it's pretty significant. It's meaningful for this season. There's an author by the name of Kay Arthur. This is what she wrote. And it's pretty simple, so I did not really put it on the PowerPoint. Just listen to what she says. She says, if you don't plan to live the Christian life totally committed to knowing your God and walking in obedience to Him, then don't begin. For this is what Christianity is all about. It is a change of citizenship, a change of governments, a change of allegiance. And if you have no intention of letting Christ rule your life, then forget Christianity. It is not for you. It may sound pretty harsh, but this is what it means to really have Jesus become your shepherd. He's not just a tyrant ruler who comes and asks you to move over. That's not the kind of king Jesus is. He's a shepherd king who cares about your pain, cares about your concerns, cares about your fear, cares about your anxiety, even cares about your shame and all the things that you carry in darkness. But for Him to become a shepherd, you have to relinquish the control over your own life and invite Him. That's what it really means to be a Christian. Not just once, not just for one season, but for the rest of life. And this peace and joy that the angel announced on peace on earth to those whom God's favor rests, this is an exclusive gift that is only available to those people who will choose Jesus as their own shepherd. So tonight, I hope you'll renew your covenant with Him once again. We can show up to a place like this and say, I'm a Christian, I'm baptized, and I give towards missions. But if we walk out of this place thinking that I have control over my life, and I get to make all the decisions, I get to find my own water or my own pasture, we have really missed what Jesus is really promising us. Will you just stand with me for a moment? And in a minute, I'm going to pray over you. But if you're coming in here today with any kind of anxiety or fear, any kind of deep concerns for your future, or maybe you're right now walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Maybe you're facing some enemies right now. The Lord's invitation is, will you let me be your shepherd? Will you trust me? Will you let go of your control? And will you let me come and rule over your life? Not as a tyrant king, but a loving shepherd. Will you let me lead you to quiet waters? Take a moment to really come before the Lord and do some exchange. Lord, quiet my soul, restore my soul, strengthen my soul. Will you reach out your hands before the Lord, and I want to pray a blessing over you. Father, it's so easy to miss this gift of joy and peace that was announced to the shepherds in the field, partly because we've formed our own definition of joy. We've held on to our own understanding of peace. Oh Lord, thank you for reminding us that this peace and this joy is real. And you have it for us, that you're inviting us into it. Father, there are many weary souls in this place tonight, including my own. And yet, your desire is to refresh us, to restore us, to pour out your cup and anoint us so that our cup will overflow and we will know how to live from this reality of abundance that you promised, Lord. I pray that this will become a reality for every person who's standing here in this place tonight, so that our lives and our faith and our walk with you will be a source of refreshing and blessing to other people. Those who are living in a peaceless time, they don't know what joy is or what hope is, Lord. Will you send us and use us to be an instrument of such blessing, Lord? Pray that this will be also just the blessing for this church community, that every time they gather together in your name and celebrate, that your joy and peace will overflow. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.